And we're live.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It is May 15th here in the Chabinet meeting. We have some crazy, crazy things going on as always. First off, I need to apologize, to the Gavel because she would be with us if it wasn't for my crazy, hectic schedule. Gavel, if you're listening, I'm sorry. You can punch me in the shoulder later. My sincerest apologies. First off, I am the department chair.
I am the cabinet.
And some crazy stuff, as always, it seems, are going on every week.
It's been a lively news week.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, there's four things here that obviously you and I just prior to starting here talked about that we want to get into. But the first one that has been in the news that I know we've been talking about with our peers as well as with our clients is the pipeline news coming out with is it Olympic? Who is it? Colonial Pipeline. That's
Pipeline.
Okay. Yes. So I'm sure, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Colonial Pipeline, for essentially almost 5 to 6 days, had their pipeline completely shut down by a spyware attack, or not spyware, excuse me. They essentially were hacked with ransomware.
It's a ransomware attack, right?
Yes.
So some people will just make a distinction and say this is not a hack; it is an attack. But that's really splitting hairs among people who, distinguish amongst such things. For the average person, it will feel the same. Your system is compromised. It has been violated from the outside.
Right. A software latched onto this system, locked out Colonial, and proceeded to exploit them.
And this is a major pipeline that runs down the eastern coast of the United States, all the way from North Jersey, where oil is refined, down through Atlanta to Houston, right? So actually, is it that it's pumped from East Texas, where the crude is mined, right, up to Jersey, where it's refined? That makes sense.
And that specific pipeline was 45%. It held and essentially transported 45% of the gasoline going from the south to the east coast. And again, we're talking about gasoline primarily for the use of cars as well as airplanes, if I understand correctly. And what's fascinating, and I don't want to get too deep into it because I think we're going to get into this next week, it forced people to realize that inflation, which is currently going on in this economy, no matter how much moss and dirt and mud is thrown on top of it, to be like, oh no, it's not here, it's happening.
You can keep the interest rates low, but there's a price for that too, right? Like there's only so much wriggle room in the economy. Even Keynes understood this, so you can keep your numbers that you care about nice, but there will be other costs.
Right, and certainly that is something that I know you want to get into, is something I want to get into, and that the Gavel specifically mentioned that she wants to get into. We're going to save that for next week. The only thing I want to end with on Colonial Pipeline is the fact that they paid the $5 million ransom.
I was shocked. I mean, a part of me is not shocked because other high-profile entities, school districts, hospitals, governments have turned around and paid. I just think that is an appalling policy. As an IT semi-professional works for a small business and handles a good deal of their IT, we were faced with a similar situation. Obviously, our information is not nearly as mission critical as a regional pipeline, but we made the decision, hey, there's no guarantees here in this life, and there's no way we're going to pay up to have our own information back. We're just going to nuke it all, start fresh, zero out the drives, and set up a new system and set it up more secure. But the idea that you would pay people to get access to your own property, it's just, for me, it's don't negotiate with terrorists. It's unbelievable, because what guarantees that they don't come back next week or a year later or 10 years later and say, hey, double this time?
Right, and you now know that a target is painted on our backs because, if they paid for this, what else would they pay for?
Yeah, and so every organization that's smaller than this giant organization with its armies of technicians and lawyers and whatever else, how could they possibly fight, when they have this being set as an example. So I just think it's appalling. I think it should be illegal to pay.
I mean, that's private company. I don't know if I want to get into that fight,
No, no,
but
it's not. It should be illegal to aid and abet a criminal, and that's what you're doing.
well, if you have the president breathing down your neck, which I'm certain Biden was doing.
Breathing down your neck to not aid and abet criminals, because that's what the executive should be encouraging.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what.
no, of course
Yeah,
he wants the oil turned back on. He wants the economy to look good, but
I
shouldn't have
mean,
been exposed to the internet to begin with. All right, so I'm probably. I'll let you have the last word on it, but I've probably gone too far.
well, no, I mean, you definitely went into points that I don't know if we're going to get into next week, but that are vital. And it is sad and ridiculous that $5 million was paid to these individuals just to get back into the system that is sitting on our territory. And it goes back to something you and I had discussed last week, which is how we let our infrastructure, particularly critical infrastructure like this, how do we allow it to get opened up for it to be
This is a
active?
brazen. I mean, we joke about how like McAfee virus scan is a protection racket, stuff like that, but this is a brazen textbook protection racket. And I mean, it's like the mob comes by and says, "Well, it'd be a shame if your kneecaps broke this week. Why don't you
Right.
give us some money to make sure it doesn't happen?"
And you know that the 17 states, along with the federal government, declared states of emergency, shifted oil and resources to make the price of gasoline that was going on for that week not so bad. Of course, tell that to the citizens in Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, just as examples that had lines and lines of people
Right.
to get gas,
And
and they couldn't
I've
get
heard
it.
people make fun of these people and say, "Oh, look how stupid! Look at these rubes! Look how dangerous!" I understand that there were some images that were, a little bit Darwin Awardish with people like with tons of gas and open containers and stuff. But at the same time, like, what if it's your business and you know that you need to get some jerry cans in the back of a truck and be ready to go because otherwise you won't be able to serve your, keep your business running and keep your employees paid and everything else. So this is real. This isn't just like an imaginary problem. Oh, look at these rubes who need gasoline or whatever. Like you're driving your Tesla and you're making fun of these people. Like
Right,
a
and I'm not even
huge
making.
portion of our economy runs on gasoline, and
Yeah.
these people. Yeah, there's a thing where it's like, okay, well the oil came back, so this is an overreaction and it's going to artificially drive prices up. So what if it's real or it's artificial? It's real enough to the guy trying to get gas at the pump.
Right. And I'm not even making fun of them. I'm more looking at the fact that there were gas stations that completely ran out of gas and couldn't get any more. And that shows you how fragile our structure is. And I know, I mean, what you just said is really an interesting point because it shows how inflation is happening in our economy because everything is driven up. And as much as we want to get into it, I got to stop
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah. This is a next week discussion. All
Right.
right, so I have another entertaining and impending doom. I have to make choices on May 18th as a resident of the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, even before that, I wanted to,
Oh,
to, to
yep.
mention to you. Another big news. In other fascinating news, the CDC just yesterday, the day before, I think, yeah, on Thursday, mentioned that we no longer need to wear masks
If
if you are fully vaccinated. As long as you're outside, or you could be in a building. Their recommendation was that if you were on public transport, you should still wear a mask. Otherwise, you're pretty good to go. Schools were kind of left out,
what if the
understandable.
people in the room with you are vaccinated and you are not?
Then you need to wear a mask
Why?
because you are not vaccinated.
Yes, but who would I be at risk of either giving or getting the virus to or from?
Well, they're claiming that even if you're vaccinated, you can still get you can still
Well,
possibly get it, but a much
okay, so
lower
so
possibility.
we've said this is safe, this is not by some threshold of scale.
Well, and the worst part is that Biden yesterday came forward and in a speech essentially said, get fully vaccinated or you're going to have to keep the mask on. Get vaccinated. He's now pushing it, not that he hasn't been already, he is pushing it down people's
So the
throats. That's
CDC
what he's doing.
recommendation that you wear a mask, which is medical advice, is going to
Well,
become a regulatory mandate indefinitely.
well, certain states took on what the CDC said and adopted the majority of what the CDC said. I know
Mhm.
where we are, Pennsylvania, as you just mentioned, they have decided to do that as well. Of course, I find it really fascinating because there are people who are saying, "Oh no, we should keep our masks on."
Yeah,
Some of
well,
the
in
House
fact, I heard a rumor that a message was sent to schools that for the entirety of the next school year that the masks should remain in place, that the
yeah,
governor's
I heard
mask orders would remain in place.
yeah, Mr. Wolf, definitely throwing ideas out there. It sounds like to me, their cabinet, that he is not following the science, is he?
Following the science is such a strange phrase.
Oh, I know it is, but it's been used on individuals who decided that, oh, we don't want to wear a mask. Oh, well, the science says you should. Oh, well, you know what? The CDC, who I do believe is the head healthcare professionals in the country, rather than that of any state, are the science.
The
Should
idea that there is a science, the
I'm gonna
science,
poke the science
the science.
the science is saying we don't need to wear a mask. So I am not going to wear a mask. Go away.
You mean a scientist said, or a collection of scientists said? The
I am
science.
saying a collection of scientists. Of course, yeah. Let's not even get into that ball game. Well, some scientist says one thing, one scientist
I
says
refuse
another.
to accept this framing, so I'm going to poke.
You go ahead, poke at me, poke.
I have poked.
You're poking at me, but I'm poking at other people who are saying follow the science. Well, yeah. Here's what quote the science. Please tell me what group of people are above the CDC besides the WHO.
Well, I don't consider the WHO above anything in the United States. It's an international organization.
Hence why I put that out to you specifically.
Right. No, it's not sovereign.
So in this case, as much as I can't stand the CDC, anyone who's going to
Something
come to
like
me,
sovereign in that there's an actual legal mandate for its existence in the United States.
Yeah,
But it serves in an advisory capacity. It doesn't have executive authority. Now the executives can make decisions, and this is what we're going to get into with the ballots this week, I think.
yes. I mean, I'm running around trying to search for that tiny little video of Joe Biden saying "put on a mask," but I can't seem to find it at
I
this
mean,
exact
there are
moment in time.
lots of those. But yeah, I mean, he can say that. Um, I am. I continue to be astounded at how cowed the American people have been. I'm not saying that COVID is not a danger. I'm not saying that it was not perhaps an No, I disagree. It was never an existential threat to the nation, which is what the federal government should be concerned with. It was a legitimate concern and a legitimate threat to certain groups of the population at large and to individuals in specific. And I feel like as though those individuals should have been able to make the choices that seemed safest or best for them. I don't know that the entire nation should have been compelled by force to do anything. And it is astounding to me that here we are a year later with very different information and much more complete information in some ways than we had a year ago. And we're still reacting in the same way. And I don't know how long it can last, but it terrifies me that it has already lasted this long. And it leads me to wonder whether or not this could be indefinite for the rest of my life.
I mean, I really don't think that's going to be the case. But let's just listen to this real quick, and
Oh,
we'll
you want to listen?
comment on
I
that.
can't share the audio with you.
We don't want to let up.
But
We all
will
know
the
how
video be able
tough
to
this
hear it?
virus has been.
Yeah.
The safest thing for the country is for everyone to get vaccinated. And getting vaccinated is easier than ever. We've worked so hard. We have 80,000 locations. 90% of you live within 5 miles of one of those locations. You can find a vaccine site near
Okay.
you.
It's really, really easy to get vaccinated, and you should do it, and you should wear a mask. Right?
Just
Yes,
nearest
please,
you can
please,
go
please
and
get
get
vaccinated.
vaccinated
I
now.
want 70% of the U.S. population.
Text
Many
your zip
places
code.
don't require an appointment. It's
Why would I text anybody my zip code?
He's grasping at straws. I think the U.S. government has come to the point now where, here you go, the CDC has said this, and now you have a lot of Americans who are going to be able to walk around who did not get vaccinated. And when they walk into Walmart, because Walmart was one of the first stores to say, oh, if you're vaccinated, you can come in without a mask.
Right.
That's happening on the 18th. People are going to walk in and just say, oh, I'm vaccinated.
Right.
You don't have to show your card. You don't have to show anything. What are they going to do? Throw you out? So he's desperate.
It should be illegal for them to even ask whether or not you're vaccinated.
Right. And that's the point, is that someone's going to make that mistake. But it's going to happen. And he is desperately trying to get more people vaccinated. And it's not going to happen. It's over.
Right. Anybody who wanted to has gotten it. Right.
Right. I mean, there's going to be a few out there who are certainly the process is still happening,
right.
Obviously.
Anybody in the high-risk section of the population who was like tier 1 or tier 2 in terms of like front of the line if they want it kind of thing has gotten it for sure.
Right. Now, if we're to believe the numbers that are out there right now, they're saying, 46% of people have gotten at least one dose of the vaccine.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's not a bad number.
It sounds like the portion of the population that voted for Joe Biden. Might be 1-to-1.
Oh God, I don't even want to get into that. All right. So speaking of voting, I guess we might as well use that as the segue to get into a vote that's about to happen in our home state.
Well, yeah, and this is going to center on these issues. So here it is. There are 4 questions on the ballot being sent directly to the voters. I'm not necessarily opposed to direct ballot initiatives. I think that they can be a good workaround for some of the red tape of the system otherwise. I am curious about receiving 4 questions at once, all of which seem rather important, which NBC 10 Philadelphia wants to try and explain to me. So let's just read these and then see what you think. We'll go one at a time.
Okay.
Pennsylvania ballot question number 1. Shall the Pennsylvania Constitution be amended to change the existing law and increase the power of the General Assembly to unilaterally terminate or extend a disaster emergency declaration, and the powers of Commonwealth agencies to address the disaster regardless of its severity pursuant to that declaration, through passing a concurrent resolution by simple majority, thereby removing the existing check or balance of presenting a resolution to the governor for approval or disapproval. Now, would you like Pennsylvania's explanation of that? Or, sorry, NBC 10's explanation?
Oh, I might as well for those of us who are watching.
Sure.
So
NBC 10 says that if you vote yes, you will agree to give the legislature by simple majority vote, that is 51% of the legislature, as opposed to like 2/3 vote or something, the sole power to take away the governor's existing authority to make disaster emergency declarations and coordinate with relevant PA agencies. If you vote no, you disagree with giving the legislature by simple majority vote the sole power to take away the governor's existing authority to make disaster emergency declarations and to coordinate with relevant PA agencies.
So, what is it, the tone in your voice that you seem to be disapproving of NBC 10's concept of answers?
Well, they make it seem as though this would remove the governor's ability to do anything to respond to emergencies. And I'm not entirely sure of that. I also have some issues with the question itself. But before I get into those, I'd like to see what you think the answer should be.
Oh, yes.
Like you're sitting in the poll booth, you're staring at this thing. You kind of feel like you've got a test, like you could take all the time you want in the poll booth, but you feel like you ought to not be like a jerk and be in there more than 5 minutes or so. And you're just looking at this word salad of a question, right? I mean, this is one sentence.
Yeah. Now I see where you're coming from. Yes, the wording. The first question is actually not the one that bothers me so much.
It's the one that bothers me most. We'll get into the second question in a minute.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I'm voting yes on this personally.
Okay.
I believe that the legislature, who is the closest representative to me, the voter, in my state, should be the one to tell the governor, no, I don't think this is a good idea. If there is something bad enough out there that we need a state of emergency, every single person's going to vote on that relatively quickly, I think. Now, I'm talking about a major disaster, right? I'm not talking about the whole thing with COVID, although some people would consider that a major disaster. I personally do not. That is a slow burn, something that we can figure out a better way to do this. And somehow that would have been figured out. But to this.
So changing an emergency declaration, right? So the emergency, whether or not to either extend or terminate a governor's emergency declaration under present law in PA, it requires a 2/3 vote. That is unanimity pretty much across the board. That's what 2/3 votes are for, to reflect that the populace is unified on the question and not that there's a narrow majority. I think that was a useful check and balance. Now, I'm inclined to vote yes. And that makes me sad. It makes me sad that this check and balance has to be diminished because of, one, what I perceive to be the governor's bad behavior and abuse of emergency powers, and two, what I believe to be the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's abdication of its responsibility to correctly identify the separation of powers between the governor and the legislature. And this is where we are, and this is now our recourse, but it doesn't make me happy.
Oh, I would definitely agree, but the unfortunate answer to why that is the fact that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has become completely faction-oriented.
Yes.
And so has the political parties in terms of what is going on in Harrisburg.
Yes.
And it's absolutely ridiculous that that's where we are. We can't even come together on little things, so we have to turn it into this. And again, George Washington was right. Beware of factions, and here we are. And please don't think that, if you've been watching, that you think that, the cabinet and myself are instantly just going to side with the more conservative majority.
No, this was not a knee-jerk for me. This was a sobering moment where I looked at that and said, I should never agree to language like this. And then realized when I checked through the last year of history of the governor's behavior, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's behavior, and the various motions that the PA legislature passed that were essentially ignored, that I felt that I begrudgingly have to agree with this language.
And that is the one half of me. It is completely in your ballpark in that it's saddened to see this. The thing is, the other half of me, which was the knee-jerk, yes, instantly, is that this is the way it is. And I hate to say that, but I know it. The realist in me is like, this is what it's going to take, is a 51% majority. Here we are. That's what we're going to need. So, yes, for me.
Yep. So that's why that's a yes for me as well. Now, question number 2, I think, is very, very interesting. Shall the Pennsylvania Constitution be amended to change the existing law so that a disaster emergency declaration will expire automatically after 21 days, which is a fortnight and a half, by the way, regardless of the severity of the emergency, unless the General Assembly takes action to extend the disaster emergency? The governor may not declare new disaster emergency to respond to the dangers facing the Commonwealth unless the General Assembly passes a concurrent resolution. The General Assembly enacts new laws for disaster management. Explanation?
Yes, let's do it. Might as well.
NBC 10 says, if you vote yes, you agree to change existing law to limit any governor's disaster emergency declaration, no matter the severity, to 21 days from 90. Apparently, under existing law, it's only 90. Unless and until the legislature votes by simple majority to extend the disaster emergency declaration and take away the governor's authority to manage new emergency and disaster situations. If you vote no, you disagree with changing the existing law that provides the governor with the power to issue emergency declarations without a 21-day limitation or by simple majority vote by the legislature. And any governor retains authority to act in emergency and disaster situations.
So when I read this, at first my knee was like, yes, instantly. And then there's a piece of me that's like, well, wait a minute. It feels that the governor really gets scalped on this one.
Yep. There's a
I would
combination
think
of things here that it's like, wait, and he can't so can't
right,
declare
like
new
yeah.
emergency to respond to the dangers. Well, related to the original 21-day emergency or related to some new emergency?
I
And
think
this
it's
is
related.
this has been a
Related.
game that's played by executives throughout. And the POTUS started this in the 20th century. This is why we have endless wars. That they say, okay, well, this is a slightly different emergency, right? And so then every 90 days they change it out. So I think that's what this is designed to do, but this could not be worded worse.
Hmm.
Now I do agree that 21 days is much better than 90 days. And if that was the only change, I'd be all for it. I haven't even asked your question. So you said your knee jerk was yes, and then you thought,
I thought about it, and I felt that the governor is getting scalped a little bit on this one. I feel that you're taking away a little bit too much power from the governor and giving it to the hands of the legislature. But
right,
if I have to pick between gun number one and gun number two, I'd rather have more decentralized power, in which case I'm going to vote yes on this.
right. And so what's crazy to me is I actually want ranked order for these. Right? I want to be able to say measure number 2, but only if measure 1 doesn't pass. um, 21 days. Here's the thing: an emergency is something emergent,
Well,
and
90 days
therefore it
is
shouldn't be
excessive.
90 days. That's a long darned time. That's no longer emergency. That is now a known quantity that you've been living with for 3 months.
And that's a lot of money that is just being thrown around willy nilly in any way that the governor in this case would see fit.
That's true. You let no disaster go to waste. So it's just really strange to me, and I don't know why we can't go down to 21 days from 90 without that other language about scalping the governor's ability to declare new emergencies, unless they had specified in that language. See, I would actually like longer wording on some of these, and perhaps multiple sentences. Um, but it should say, uh, shall declare no new emergency which is related to the initial emergency without the consent of the assembly. But instead it says shall declare no new emergencies and shall have no powers to react. I don't know. It's a lot. So anyway, yeah, I wish we had
Mm-hmm.
ranked order for these, but I'm probably going to knee-jerk yes on both of these, having waffled back and forth and gotten past my knee-jerks, for the reason that you said that it had to go yes with number 1, which I thought was actually the larger scalping. But now on
Yeah.
rereading, I see your point. And I have to say yes to both because it's less about the wording of that law, which is what it should be about, and more because of where we are, because of all the sad things that have happened, about sending a message to Harrisburg.
Right. Right.
And this is
And
my chance. This is my voice with the lever. And I don't get to decide how these were worded, but I do get to say, not that one.
yeah,
So
and
I
mind you,
probably vote
this
yes
is
on
the
both those.
Republicans. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off here. This is the Republicans. This is the Republicans saying we are going to take some serious power away from the governor here. Mostly because,
Beware, Republicans, when you reduce things to a simple majority.
oh yeah,
We need only look at the present Senate and realize that Joe Manchin is the only thing that stands between you and 4 more Supreme Court justices that are left of Lenin, a Washington, D.C. that is a state, a Puerto Rico that is a state, and God knows what else.
man.
Simple majority.
Oh, before
The thing is that it comes around. And that's what
you're,
concerns me about that, about number 1 there, actually. So
now
we both have
you're
serious reservations about both of these. But again, we feel like this is our only voice left because the courts have not ruled in ways that we perceive to be correct according to the Pennsylvania Constitution, and the governor has not acted in ways that we perceive to be correct according to the Pennsylvania Constitution. And the legislature has not acted in ways. The Republican legislature has not acted in ways in which I feel are appropriate. Number 3.
correct. Yeah, and yes, number 3. Oh my God, go on.
Shall the Pennsylvania Constitution be amended by adding a new section providing that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged because of an individual's race or ethnicity? If you vote yes, you agree that all levels of PA government entities and institutions be prohibited from discriminating against individuals because of their race or ethnicity. If you vote no, you're a racist. If you vote no, you disagree with changing PA law since current state and federal. You disagree with changing PA law, since current state and federal laws, including the Pennsylvania Constitution and Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution, already provide protections against discriminations by all levels of Pennsylvania government entities and institutions.
Not to jump back for 1 second, but this is, here we are. We're discussing these things, and I just got a news alert from USA Today saying Colonial Pipeline paid a $5 million ransom. But will that only invite other malware hacks?
Yes.
If the payments stop, the attacks will stop.
This is entirely predictable. Even USA Today.
Oh my God.
I mean, I consider USA Today to be like the like grade school pamphlet of newspapers.
I was gonna say the Tonka truck of newspapers. Yes.
Even they can recognize this.
Right, and not to say negatively. I mean, this is what I use. I use USA Today a lot for some of our.
Well, because sometimes the obvious things are a little too obvious for the New York Times to be willing to say. If they stated the obvious, then they would have to admit to certain viewpoints around the world that don't jive. But USA Today seems to be blind to the irony of some of the things it publishes as headlines, and for that I enjoy it.
Oh God! All right, going back to ballot question 3. Okay, so I'm assuming you're asking me which one am I going to vote here?
I am.
I'm going to vote no, and the reason I'm going to vote no is that the Constitution, which we have in place,
and Pennsylvania's Constitution,
correct. These are already in place. A citizen is a citizen. It does not matter the color of your skin. It does not matter what religion you follow. It does not matter anything. You are an American, and you have the same equal rights as anyone. You are no better or no worse than me. You are no better or no worse than your neighbor. You are equal. Now, I know there's people that are going to say,
in the eyes
of
the law
true.
And before the law. There are many ways in which you are unequal, but those are not related to the law or how the nation should perceive you.
And that's the key, should. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of people in systems of government that have not done that. And it's very, very sad, because then you have individuals who believe that they came to this country, or whether it was by force or whether they came here willing by their own wills to do so, and they have been unfairly treated in some cases.
I just think this provision is moot.
It is moot.
What's frustrating is people are going to get into the ballot box, they're going to look at the question and be like, of course I'm not a racist, and they're going to click the button. I mean, good on NBC 10 for actually providing this much information. But,
right.
I mean, if you presented me with that, should this be? Rather than shall this be amended, if you just asked, should the Pennsylvania Constitution say that a person's race or ethnicity shouldn't matter, I would say yes. And that's how most people are going to view that question.
Right, but does it, even if, let's say, yes wins, does it really change anything?
It shouldn't. Man, that stuff that went through, or almost went through in California, was super scary, where they were like, oh, let's repeal the Equal Protections Clause because it doesn't allow us to basically overdo it for previous injustices and get the revenge.
Right. Oh my God, yeah, I remember that. That was messed up.
Right, so would this be a bulwark against that? Not really, not as worded.
No, it's not in the same ballpark.
I would like a question that says, it shall be unconstitutional for Pennsylvania ever to pass laws favoring or disfavoring races or ethnicities. I would vote for that.
Yeah, I would too.
All right, so this is what a weird question. All right. Ballot question number 4. Do you favor expending the use of the indebtedness authorized under the referendum for loans for volunteer fire companies? There's a referendum authorizing loans for volunteer fire companies. They're loans, right? Or are they grants? Volunteer ambulance services and volunteer rescue squads under 35 PACS Section 7371.1 related to the referendum for additional indebtedness to include loans from... By the way, one of the things this governor did earlier in his career is pretty much blow the locks off any debt limits. And I'm pretty sure that's what this is a reference to. To include loans to multiple fire departments or companies that provide services through paid personnel and emergency medical services companies for purpose of establishing and modernizing facilities to house apparatus equipment, ambulances, and rescue vehicles, and for purchasing apparatus equipment, ambulances, and rescue vehicles, protective and communications equipment, and other accessory equipment necessary for the proper performance of the duties of fire companies and medical services companies. If you vote yes, you support expanding PA's loan program to paid municipal as well as volunteer fire and emergency medical services companies. That is, extending loans to include private companies that are for-profit companies. If you vote no, you support keeping PA's loan program available to volunteer fire and emergency services and not to paid municipal fire and emergency medical services companies. By the way, I assume these are 0% loans because anybody, any day of the week, can always go to the bank and get a loan.
I'm voting no on this.
I am also voting no on this. That is obscene to me. How can we reduce the amount of spending we do on this? I've seen that the emergency services in this region, at least, are rather abundantly equipped.
There's plenty of money out there. This is just an excuse to spend more and throw it in other places. That's all this is.
Yep.
And it doesn't need to happen anymore. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there. The volunteer fire companies are doing very well. The paid companies are doing very well. And if there's ever a problem where they desperately need money, I guarantee they're going to be able to get it. They don't need to get it from the state of Pennsylvania.
All right. So I think we've finally reached our sort of grand finale here. We know how we're going to vote on Tuesday. This cleared some things up for me, going back and forth with you. I have a clearer idea how I intend to vote Tuesday in the primaries. And now I think we can turn our attention to Rumble in the Middle East 2021, the ever-recurring, never-ending Gaza Strip dispute and West Bank dispute. So I'm going to start with some Ruptly footage because Russian propaganda service, though it be, and be very clear, it is, what it does do is provide sometimes some really raw footage. And I'm just going to take the most recent Ruptly. This is going to be our tradition. And we're going to try and figure out what the hell is going on, where in the world, and why.
Ooh. It's like that game that we have some.
This technology can bond anything with UV light.
Yeah, it's sort of like GeoGuessr, except the headline spoils it a bit.
It can give you a super
geopolitical video guesser.
Yeah, but keep in mind the headline is provided by Russian propaganda services. So let's decide for ourselves what is actually going on here.
Is that an Antifa flag? That's an Antifa flag.
That is an Antifa flag. Isn't it scary to see that flag in Germany? Hold on, let's see if we can.
So this Palestinian flag, Antifa flag, I saw an Egyptian flag.
Yeah. Yep, there's an Antifa flag. It's a super scary set of colors to see flying in the square in Berlin. Or Leipzig. I can actually get you this audio. Hold a moment. Stop streaming. Change window. Change to this window. This time you should have audio.
Yeah, I do. Yep, and here's the other side.
These people with the prepared. Oh, the people united shall never be divided. That sounds like Antifa.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's
There are some professional protesters among this group, for sure. When they come
Libya's
with the slogans
flag.
like that, yep. And here we have people flying Israeli flags. Anti-Semitism.
Poor German police. Oh, why here? Why?
I have an answer for you, but you're not going to like it.
Oh, I'm
My
sure
answer
you
is
are.
Merkel. You have a large Arab population in Germany of late. There's always been a Turkish connection, but there has been a Syrian connection of late. Over the last, 20 years. Couldn't be anything to do with Merkel's policies.
Yeah, let's not even talk about that whole
why?
process.
You said why.
I know. It's good for the viewers, who are watching this. Like, oh, well, obviously, why are there so many Middle Eastern individuals in Germany? Well, yeah, let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that.
Let's not talk about it, but let's mention it.
Right.
So there we are. Yep, so that's what's going on in Germany today, and there are similar things happening in the United States. There are similar things happening all over Europe. So what is happening in the Levant and in Israel and in the Palestinian territories, both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which are different and have slightly different politics and things, and Shervan made some good points earlier in the was that the covert cabal? No, it was what's his channel?
Oh,
Caspian Report.
Yeah, Caspian Report. Yeah.
It was very well thought out. So, and finally, I've got this stuff that you have provided. Yeah, here we go. Share my screen again. Change windows.
So while Cabinet is getting this ready, this is an amazing source. If you want to look what's going on around the world, and not just from a news source, this is video footage from just random individuals. So obviously take it with a grain of salt, but you can look up, in this case, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I can look up Syria, Myanmar, the United States. You name the place, and I can find news reports from local news and from random video footage that someone just took in the street. Uncensored, uncut. No one is in between you and what's coming.
Is it safe to say today, May 5th, 2021, the Gaza Strip is a war zone?
I believe you mean May 15th.
Yeah. Did I not?
Yeah. You said May 5th. But yes, look at all this. This is just craziness. Now, let me ask you, because I started watching the Caspian Report, but I did not get to finish it yet. What were his conclusions?
His conclusions were essentially that both sides are pouring oil on this fire, and both sides are sort of trapped into doing so by their own sort of cultural support.
So what caused this to begin?
Well, he said it was a small spark that caused it, but the reason it's growing into a conflagration is that both sides can't afford politically to back down. So he views them as sort of unfortunate actors caught under the circumstances that they are in.
Isn't it an election year in Israel right now?
It's a forever election year in Israel because Netanyahu continues to win with split support. So he ends up having to form coalition governments, which means that he can continue to be called out on votes of no confidence over and over again. And by the way, he continues to win with just enough majority not to have a fully functioning government. So he keeps having to go to coalition governments.
Oh, jeez.
That's been for about the last 5 years.
Right. I know he's been receiving a lot of pressure because he's been there such a long time, which is inherent.
Now, it's worth noting that his major rival, the Likud party, holds the same official positions on all of the choices he made over the last couple days.
Mm-hmm.
So to be fair to Shervan, certainly, there are factors where the bulk of the people on each side actually support this conflict. If you view them as equal actors with equal moral failings or what is it, moral virtues, right? If you view them on equal footing in that regard, and actually, I think my problem with Shervan is he seems to view it outside the context of history and only within the context of the current circumstance and the current leanings that people have, and he acknowledges that those leanings come from history. But he likes to look things in a very detached chessboard kind of way, and certainly geography plays a factor, and he's right about that. But
yeah,
it is more of a determinist viewpoint than I'm. This is always my complaint about Caspian Report, is that it's very determinist from my point of view, and it detaches people from responsibility for the choices that they make.
If you were to zoom in, I mean, there's some interesting video here. If you zoom into, go up to Ashkelon up there, up to the left a little bit, and stop. Oh, God.
Okay, yeah.
Scroll down, you'll see there's a little video icon, like a YouTube icon, in between all those missiles, the red missiles there.
Oh, okay. Down here.
Yeah, click on it. It's in there. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead, see if you can. We don't even need the sound. You're just going to see missiles.
Tel Aviv rockets launched.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it won't play right there?
No, because I'm not logged into anything ever. Oh, here we go. You see this?
Yep, I'm seeing it. I mean, there you go. This is what's happening. And this is the beauty of this little tool here that
you can see in real time almost a lot of this stuff. Like you just click each one and it'll tell you when it occurred. It'll try to give you some idea of who it is or what it is. Now, these rockets are being fired from Gaza towards Israeli territory, or these are rockets that are intercepting things? What is this?
No, these are rockets that are being thrown into Israeli territory.
Okay, so just willy-nilly. MLRS kind of stuff. Gotcha.
Yep. So
and a lot of this equipment is coming from Iran, at least in the Gaza Strip. In other places, there are other supporters. Egypt used to be a big supporter of the Gaza Strip. It has not been since the 70s.
And especially now, it's not going to be with the U.S. on top of it.
Well...
We'll get to the
U.S. We'll get to the U.S. and the 70s and the Carter administration, because there are some similarities right now.
Well, that's actually you're right, because I said that and I was instantaneously thinking of the Trump administration. I don't know that relationships is going to be as good as it was now.
I imagine not. I imagine that's why all of this has sparked off.
And you know what? I am in agreement with you there. I think
that Trump's support for Israel was what did I want to say? Was in no uncertain terms, right? It was a very clear, very opaque support. Opaque? Well, yeah. Transparent support. It was transparent and obvious support. Opaque is a word that it could be used another way. I mix my metaphors there. But and as a result of that obviousness, there was stability in the region because it was very clear where the red lines were, and so how much you could push and how much far beyond would merit a response. So. If this had happened under the Trump administration, there would have been a statement in the last 3 days from the President of the United States effectively guaranteeing the peace and prosperity of Israel. Or effectively guaranteeing the continued trade relationship, things like this. That has not come from the White House.
Well, Biden Biden did say that he was supporting, if I remember correctly, let me look that up real quick. I think
Now,
Biden did
what
say
were
that
his
he was
exact
supporting the
words?
Israelis.
What were his exact words? Be curious. And does anybody think that they have any meaning?
Let me see here. Let's go. Oh, never mind. Let's see what Politico says. Biden calls for end to violence in talks with Netanyahu and Abbas. My bad. I could have swore.
This is violence. It's bad. Both sides are responsible, and you both need to stop.
Oh, here we go. President Joe Biden on Saturday reiterated his, quote, strong support for Israel's rights to defend itself in a conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but expressed concerns on growing civilian casualties and targeting of media outlets as violence escalated in Gaza over the weekend.
That is the definition of a mixed message.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
There, I have explained the Middle East in 5 minutes. Mission accomplished. What else can I do for you today?
Well, if you can do that in 5 minutes, let's get into the effects of Sykes-Picot.
Yeah, sure. Let's get into Balfour.
You do that in 6 minutes?
No, we cannot. Look, obviously, this is a conflict that is over 100 years old, and honestly, from some points of view, over a millennia old. And it has to do with how the Arabs view the Jews, how Israel represents itself as a Jewish state. Man, there's so much racism in it all, but also ethnic differences and ethnic similarities.
Oh God, the history.
The Israeli people are they're an Aramaic people, which means that they have very much in common genetically with the people who live in Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Okay, so Sykes-Picot is some bitter old men after World War I, French and British, sort of carving up their colonies in the Middle East and deciding who's going to get what. Is that the short version of the story?
Not even.
You give me
after, during. I mean, that's during. Sykes-Picot is essentially the French and the British saying during the Middle Eastern conflict, we are going to carve up the Middle East the way we see fit.
Oh, right. During World War I, right?
Right.
During the conflict with the Ottoman Turkey, allied to the Kaiserreich and to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, made up the Central Powers in the Second World War. T. Lawrence is a thing. The Arabs were told one thing. The European powers, the British and French, had different ideas than what they were willing to tell their erstwhile allies.
Right, and the whole time you also have the Americans, which are kind of involved, but the
beginning
British
to muscle
and
their
French,
way in.
Right, they're trying. The British and French want to do this before the Americans can really have a say. And from my readings, the French in particular were very adamant about controlling a lot of the Middle East, and they were adamant about controlling certain pieces of the Middle East, i.e. Syria. And the British were kind of like, well, we'll control some of this, but we're more interested in letting some of the people who live there control it. We'll just kind of watch. And the French were like, nope, we want to be there. I mean, you can get into T. Lawrence and that whole concept and the arguments that eventually went that way. But
it's worth noting that at this time in Jerusalem, which is the location of greatest contention, there were Jews, both ethnically Jewish descendant people and actively practicing Jews, that is to say, people who adhered to the sacraments of the Old Testament, and Christians, and Muslim Arabs, and other sorts of Arabs, or other sorts of Middle Eastern peoples, Zoroastrian peoples, all living in different parts of this land at this time. Is that an accurate reflection of the picture of this chunk of territory that I'm looking at?
I mean, yeah, it certainly is. The coastline is an absolute mess. But there's so many other factors too. There's so many different tribes, and their alliances change. The biggest thing with Sykes-Picot that really wasn't used is the tribal alliances. Lines were drawn in the sand, and one side was French controlled, one side was British oriented or controlled, and it paid no mind to the tribal distinctions and how complex they were
Yeah,
at
to
all.
be fair to the French and British, a serious attempt to adhere to those complexities might have resulted in a very crooked and rapidly and wildly shifting jigsaw puzzle.
Right, and obviously no one wanted that to happen, but there were a lot of people, from what I've read in London, who were very, very in the mindset of why don't we let the Arabs have a little more control here, and we'll just work with them accordingly.
Well, certainly that's
And
what T.E. Lawrence thought that they should have. Obviously, he was working very closely with them.
yes,
Now, do you think that he misrepresented what the British government was actually willing to do?
yeah, he certainly did. He was going under the belief that they were going to keep their word, but the problem is he eventually realized that they weren't.
Right.
He knew that they were not going to keep their word, and he openly supported a number of these factions in the Middle East, a number of the Arab Muslims, to actually help them to gain control of like Damascus and some of these other
Right.
cities, because, and I'll use your own words, if I can remember them correctly, considering how tired I am, that you being present, being physically there, and owning the item is 9/10 of the
Yes, possession is 9/10 of the law.
right, and that's exactly what he tried to help them with. And
Now there's another section where in the movie Lawrence of Arabia, and you would know better than most how well that reflects at least Lawrence's account of things, which is largely what we have to go by. In the end, they have possession. The world is their oyster in a lot of ways, and they end up sort of falling back to petty, as he would perceive it, petty tribal squabbling over water rights and things like this. And it gives the impression that for all their virtues, they weren't yet ready to rise up and among the nation states and be sort of in charge of this region.
and that's really the French perception,
Okay.
that they wouldn't be able to do this. And Ibn Saud, as we know, the Saudis in particular, you had, once it was over in the Middle East, a lot of the different factions, some were arguing for Arab control, some were arguing against Arab control or extremely limited Arab control. Hold up, I'm sorry, I think I lost something there. Long story short, the different kings in the Middle East, Arab kings, started fighting each other. There was squabbling, and then there was fighting, and that further proved to the factions against T.E. Lawrence, against Arab unification, against Arab control of itself, said, oh, look at this. They can't do this themselves. Maybe Sykes-Picot was the right way to go.
Right. And then how is the Middle East managed, particularly this region, from 1918 to 1945?
It's a mess. At least that's how I envision it.
So it's kind of a Wild West, where nobody's really got assertive control, right? Nobody can walk out and say, I am the official government of Jerusalem, because they would not have enough power to be able to enforce any edict.
And that was done on purpose, because you had the French who were physically there, you had the British who were physically there, who were, quote, allowing the Jewish community to be there as well, as the not just the Palestinian but the Arab community,
Right,
and
and the
the idea
Christians and the Zoroastrians and everybody else, right?
right, like everyone was supposed to have an
So
equal
Jerusalem
share.
was sort of kept as an open city, and all the different factions were pretty much kept down. And to be fair to the British and the French, looking at the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany, they might look at that and say, well, if there was an Arab state, something as powerful, for instance, as the Ottoman Empire had been, it would be a natural ally of Germany.
It was supposed to be an open state, but because of Sykes-Picot, the French and British had
Different regions
control
of control.
around the area.
Gotcha. So the British
And
controlled presumably the Sinai.
yeah, they were
because
around
they
that
controlled
area.
the Suez and they controlled Egypt. And the French controlled Syria and what we call Lebanon today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then in between was just kind of no man's land.
I mean, there were Arab tribes. There
Right.
was supposed to be a combined French-British, like, moving around, keeping an eye on things. But there was fighting. There was already fighting going on between some of the supporters that Lawrence was helping,
Right.
as well
So
as
the major
even
ports, the major city centers, the British and French managed to control, and whatever happened in the boondocks of the Middle East happened in the boondocks of the Middle East, and why should they care?
right. And again, there were distinct lines of control between the French and the British, but that was the problem, is that obviously they had some forces out there and they did things, but it was still in this case, the Wild East, Wild Middle East.
Yeah.
And the Arabs looked at this like, you lied to us, now look what you've done.
Okay. And so then you get to 1945, and there are waves of emigres from Europe and from the United States and other places, but largely from Europe for reasons that should be self-evident given the Holocaust. Jews into this region, which, according to all their traditions, is their homeland. Wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Frame
Nope,
it differently. Frame it differently so that our audience can have a different angle on things.
Well, no, that's matter of fact, that's kind of the angle that from what I have been reading, that's what they saw. They saw this as their homeland, and they realized that I can't stay in Germany, I can't stay in Russia, I can't stay in Southeastern Europe, Western Europe. Nobody wants me.
The United States, in some cases, may not take me.
Nobody would. So where do I go? I go
Home.
to the Holy Land. Yeah, I go home. And there's all these people saying, "Oh, go home, go home." The Americans will help you get there, and there'll be a state there just for you.
Right. Now there were a couple of different ways to get there. Right. It surprised me that in late 1945 and in the middle of 1946, when the United States and Russia were still sort of frenemies, things were icing up quickly, but it wasn't completely cold yet. Where the Russians wanted to get rid of the Jews in Eastern Europe, but they wanted a more elegant solution than systematically murdering them on the spot. And they basically said, anybody who wants to go to Israel can go, and we will give you an AK-47 and 2 hand grenades and transportation.
Yep. I mean, not always, maybe in the instance of an AK and grenades, but yes, they wanted. Why fight? Why create an enemy here on my home territory when I can say, "Hey, we'll let you go there"?
Right, and what's more is the Russians were maybe hoping that that the Jews who had suffered under the Nazis would perceive the Soviet Union as an ally, and that those Jews might have some pro-Marxist leanings. It's a little bit of a stretch, but this is something that the Soviet planners hoped for, that they might have a toehold in the Middle East this way, because they were still looking towards trying to export communism and to have, of course, the international order sort of controlled from Moscow. But they were feeling out at different outreach opportunities.
Right, and it really didn't work out. I mean,
no, not at all.
Obviously.
Partly because the United States also supported the Israelis, right? So,
right.
And from a post-war perspective, this is a coastal nation, and the United States controls all the salt water in the world at the time. So if you're going to choose between two courting sponsors who would like to have you as their sort of pet project, the United States is a better sponsor at that time in 1946.
And not only is that the case, the Israelis, as they started obviously calling themselves, they didn't have any time to start diving into political structure.
Oh, no, they couldn't be choosy. They had to take support from wherever it would come. And the extent of Soviet support was, we'll give you a ride there, and we hope you remember us fondly. And the extent of American support was, here's all these tanks we aren't going to use anymore.
Right.
And here's food, and here's water, and here's electricity, and so forth.
And immediately, you already had the Palestinians. You had a number of Arab nations that immediately are like, no, we don't like this.
Right.
So you had
so there's a diaspora of Jews. Now, how does the Gaza Strip get created? Does that happen right away?
No, God, I got to go back in my memory.
There are several wars, right, where the Israelis sort of, or the Jews who become the Israelis, get control of the region, the immediate region, and they do displace a lot of people that they would describe as squatters, but of course those people would describe it as their home, and those become the Palestinian people. And then those people are, there's a war, right? There's several wars where Egypt and I think Iraq and I think Syria and sometimes Jordan all gather together and attack the Israelis at once. Or, to put it in their parlance, defend the Palestinians with jets and tanks, and are repeatedly defeated by Jews who turn out to be more stubborn than expected and turn out to have American equipment. That about right?
It's in that ballpark, yeah. It was like 1947, 1949 Palestinian War.
Okay, and that's the initial sort of large part of violence carried out in the territory.
Yeah, it is. There's violence preemptively, but like we're talking about warfare. There you go. It's Israel versus the Arab League.
Oh, okay. So that's the first one where all the neighboring nations say, "Hey, that's enough of these Jews, sort of pushing their weight around. Let's take them out."
Yeah, it's Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and North Yemen at the time. So it is a unified state effort here.
Right, and they are defeated.
Yep.
5v1 or whatever the heck it was.
Well, the United States is sort of involved.
Right. Certainly providing aircraft, certainly providing equipment, and probably providing some personnel. Now, there's something else that's interesting is that during this time, the Palestinian Liberation Front is organized, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is a resistance movement to the Israeli government.
So all this goes down. All right, here I'm.
Sorry, I'm plodding along too slow, but I did want to mention that there were some ex-Nazis involved in the anti-Jewish movements in Israel. Probably not a surprise.
Well, there were still some people there. There were obviously some Arabs there.
Right. There were other displaced peoples after World War II, not just Jews, right? So there were like Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's Fallschirmjäger captain. Found his way into Palestine and trained the groups that are effectively Hamas today.
Well, I think one of the other big factors to consider here is that immediately after the war, 1948, everything's over, and basically the war is over, and Egypt's kind of the big dog here and is the one talking to Israel, right?
Right.
So Israel and Egypt essentially agree on the fact that, okay, here is the boundary line between the Gaza Strip and Israel. And it's not an international border. This is what it is. It's a border from 1906 between the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire. Sound familiar? World War I, going back that direction. Here we are. And now that you have this, they are not Egyptian citizens. They are Palestinians. But it's the old border, And the Israelis are on one side, the Palestinians on the other, and you know full well that the Egyptians were kind of in control of that area, along with some of the other Arab states, are helping, the Palestinians.
Well, and they're perfectly happy to create a problem for the Israelis that costs them almost nothing. Right? They don't have to spill blood. They don't have to spend much treasure. They just get these people riled up and let them loose.
Right. Now, mind you, and this is the thing, is that the Egyptian government effectively controlled the strip for quite a long time. But now you had all the refugees that ran in all different directions, all of the Arab refugees. They came back, but they came back to this location, which is now much, much smaller and much, much denser in population. And all of them are disillusioned and upset, obviously, at the conflict, and they point all of their anger and disillusion at the Israelis.
Nor are they discouraged from doing so.
Right.
The actors in the region have natural motivations.
Right. And the standard of living is ridiculous. Everything is bad, bad, bad news.
Right. As you can see, that it's sadly, much of this has not changed, right? Gaza is still not a place that you would want to raise a family.
Mm-hmm.
That you would want to go on vacation, that you would want to start a business. None of these things are likely to be successful in the Gaza Strip.
Right. And not to, I don't want to follow through the entirety of the history here, but then we have to get to around 1967, where we have the 6-Day War.
Oh, right.
And the IDF captures the Gaza Strip, right?
Oh, okay. So Israel actually was in full military control of this region at one point?
Yeah, after the 6-Day War, which was essentially another war between the Arab states and Israel. Israel crushes them pretty much wholeheartedly after, having a bit of a scare there for a period of time. And it is, again, imagine the IDF is no friend of the people in the Gaza Strip, and it's the same concept the other way around.
Right. There's a lot of bad blood that's gone a long way between these groups. Now, none of that deals with the West Bank, the much larger chunk of non-Israeli territory inside the traditional borders of Israel.
Yeah, that's a whole other concept.
That's a whole other ball of wax. And then you have the Golan Heights.
Yep,
right?
that's...
So there are really three prongs or flanks that present strong religious, ethnic, and political tensions in this region. And
right.
They're part of the cocktail of all this thing is that there's a lot of asymmetrical warfare happening, right? Where the people who are disadvantaged and effectively not a nation, but a collection of people inside a nation or inside the borders of what might be a nation, are turning towards and have long turned towards indiscriminate tactics. What we in the West would probably refer to as terror tactics against the nation of Israel. And now they would turn around and say Israel is a terrorist organization, they bomb children and so forth, and the Israelis would say, well, you parked your rocket launcher that you fired indiscriminately at our city next to an apartment complex, and when we blew up your rocket launcher it killed some people, sorry. But those are the sorts of accusations that fly back and forth, right?
Yeah, it's a group of people that really, they have no connection to any country anymore. They are themselves Palestinians, and they get picked on by the Israelis, who extend their property, their homes, who are slowly pushing out their borders. But in the same instance, all of the Arab states who now look at Israel like, oh, big bad United States protects them. How can we poke at Israel? Oh, I know. Let's support all these militia organizations inside the Gaza Strip, inside the West Bank, and allow them to poke at Israel for us.
Yep.
So, we could keep going.
Yeah, there's a lot. So I mean, it's difficult to know as an American how to think about all this, except that, as near as I can tell, and I'm probably very biased, and I have certain preferences for one religion over another for a number of reasons. But I recognize that this is not just a religious conflict. That's just part of the stew. But as near as I can see, the government of Israel would prefer peace and would be willing to give up some land to do it. And the most vocal and most active opponents seem not to be representing themselves in the form of a government, but seem to be disparate and loosely connected actors, which makes them very difficult to negotiate with.
My apologies. And I would agree with your last part of what you said there, but I would disagree with the first part. I disagree that Israel is saying they're willing to give up a piece of land.
Well, have they? So is the Gaza Strip claimed by the Israeli government as sovereign Israeli territory?
Depends on who you talk to in the Israeli government.
Okay. Let's say Netanyahu, for instance.
Depends on what he says in private versus what he says to the world.
Okay. As near as I could tell, like they had control of it and they gave it back.
Yeah, but that was a while ago. I don't know if I want to connect that part of the government and that time period with the current one.
Okay, so at various times there were opportunities where the Israeli government was legitimately seeking peace.
Well,
in that not peace at any cost, but we're willing to give this concession, that concession.
If you're willing to do that later, so the mid-2000s, but in 1967, when you took control of the Gaza Strip and you did not bring in food, you did not bring in water, you did not bring in supplies in effective enough numbers to actually to help the people you just controlled, and the soldiers and the government's like, oh well, if we do it this way, perhaps they'll just leave, so we can have this land the way we want it. Then do you really want those people there, or are you just hoping they'll leave so you can take control of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I clearly you could take a Machiavellian view on these things, but I think there's at least a sympathetic case to be made, and I do not believe Netanyahu to be an angel. I don't think any world leader is, and he is certainly not the cleanest among them. But I do believe that there may be a case to be made where he's looking across and saying, okay, well, we've tried negotiation over and over. It has not worked. I'm done negotiating.
Right. I mean, I'm here. I'm going to quote Levi Eshkol, who is the third prime minister of Israel. Quote, perhaps if we don't give them enough water, they won't have a choice because their orchards will yellow and wither.
Right, because they have... I mean, literally, there were greenhouses at one point in the Gaza Strip that were built by Israeli settlers who we could argue about whether or not they should have been there. But they left the greenhouses. And when the Palestinian authorities, or whatever it was that was left behind, took them over, they no longer functioned. And it was not because the Israelis stopped pumping water.
Yeah, that's a whole other point, too. And the thing is, I think there are forces at work against the Palestinians
not just their avowed enemies in Jerusalem, but also their neighbors who prefer to use them like pawns. Exactly. Just as the Chinese government, the CCP, maliciously and coldly uses the people of North Korea.
I mean, Che Guevara was in the Gaza Strip in 1959.
Yeah, just what a wonderful collection of good people, Che, Otto Skorzeny, just an A-list sort of group of people.
Right. I mean, let me send you this.
And if you don't know who Che Guevara is, I hope our listeners know who Che Guevara is. I'll get a picture of him out.
Now, mind you, I'm just because. Oh man, I just want to get to the photo. Yeah, click the photo there. I mean.
Yeah. I was typing it just the same time as you.
Yeah, Yeah, but I mean the photo, the one I just sent you.
The Gaza Strip wiki page, followed by.
Go down.
Yeah. Oh, there it
is.
is. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Wow.
that tells you everything you need to know.
I mean, is this the Egyptian representative?
Oh, I don't.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a collection of Bond villains.
That is the most beautiful way to describe it too. Like the little evil smile. The guy in the middle alone is the perfect Bond villain, and then Che looks like he's holding a drink.
Do you know who I mean when I say Otto Skorzeny?
Yes, I do.
This guy was there. Anyway, he got that knife fight for fun. All right, so yeah, that's what a session we've had today. Let's go to Epictetus. We're not going to solve all of the Middle East. I did my darndest to reduce it to a cookie cutter version, but of course, it is never that simple.
Never up the Middle East.
And you can go, I've watched a number of documentaries, and each time I watch the documentary, I come away with a different view on who was the villain, or why, this faction should have gotten this, or this shouldn't have been done, and it's just like, there are enough villains on every side to go around. Okay.
Especially in that photo.
Yeah. Maybe we should cut off military funding for everybody, but I'm not in favor of cutting off military funding only for Israel.
Oh God! Let's move.
Okay.
Let's.
But if you want to cut off military funding for everybody, I'm in. That means stop giving 300 tanks a year to Egypt or whatever the hell we do.
Oh God.
Yeah. Is this the Enchiridion? This is it.
Just a different one.
Yeah. But it is it. Okay. So I believe we were up to number 16 because we did this one with the dinner party.
Yes.
No, we did 16. The one about seeing somebody in grief and not allowing yourself to be carried away with emotion in the moment. Yes, of course, you should empathize with them. Yes, you should sympathize, but you shouldn't let the emotions rule you. So number 17, remember that you are an actor in a drama, of such kind as the author pleases to make it. If short, a short one. If long, a long one. It is his pleasure you should act a poor man, a cripple, a governor, or a private person. See that you act it naturally. For this is your business, to act well with the character assigned to you. To choose it is another's. Well, this for me is like, there was a Robert Louis Stevenson quote I ran into the other day that said something like, life is not about having good cards, it is about playing a poor hand well.
Yeah. I mean, and this goes back to some of the other things he said. Do not dwell upon the things you do not have. Dwell upon the thing you do, and cherish it while you have it.
Yeah.
So, well,
it's a good point to end. I'll let you close us out.
Indeed. So, we'll have to wait and see what happens next time. Perhaps, knock on wood, next week we will get into, maybe not knock on wood. We will not get into how bad inflation is. Hopefully it doesn't, but I have an odd feeling it will.
We can get into some theory about how bad inflation could be.
Bring out your wheelbarrows, please. I am the department chair.
I am the cabinet.
And we'll see you all next time.